Hello, my name is Owen.
And I'm Drew.
Today we're going to be talking about the impact of decolonization on one of the hybrid first and third world countries, South Africa. The decolonization period of our history was between 1945 and 1975, and a lot of nationalism was growing. The people and nations in Africa and the Middle East were fed up with being ruled by colonizers and engaged in both nonviolent and violent protests, which in some cases led to war. And sometimes decolonized states faced struggles after gaining independence, which led to even more violence.
Sometimes states were originally multiple colonies fused into one, like South Africa. In South Africa, the British took over the Dutch colonies in the Napoleonic Wars and brought the areas of their four colonies under the British Empire. White South Africans were given control over the state to govern themselves until 1961, when white voters decided to break away.
But even though the colonization was technically over, the country was still ruled by white settlers, and this period was called apartheid. The National Party, made up of white settlers, started to severely segregate the population and limit the rights of black South Africans. Because of the injustice, black protest leaders grew in popularity, the main one being Nelson Mandela, who led nonviolent protests against the National Party. Mandela was a respected leader who founded the ANC Youth League, and his popularity only skyrocketed when he was imprisoned for conspiring against the government.
Achieving true independence and freedom was hard fought. While independence was eventually achieved through negotiations with the apartheid in 1994, much violence occurred to get to that point. Initially, in the early 1950s, defiance campaigns against the apartheid began. The African National Congress, or ANC, solidified its vision in 1955 when its Congress of the People adopted the Freedom Charter, a non-racial, democratic vision for South Africa.
However, the Sharpeville massacre in 1960 led to a violent shift in the independence movement. The state used extreme violent tactics to suppress the independence movement. In turn, the ANC formed the Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, shifting to armed resistance rather than peaceful measures. The apartheid banned the ANC and the conflict shifted to an armed struggle.
Various groups fought for dominance in the search for independence. An Africanist Congress, or PAC, broke away from the ANC in 1959, advocating a more radical Africanist approach, and led anti-PASS protests. Additionally, the United Democratic Front, or UDF, a massive anti-apartheid coalition, formed in 1983, bringing together hundreds of community, worker, and student organizations.
Civil unrest and armed conflicts dominated the rest of the movement. In the 1980s, mass defiance and international sanctions increased dramatically. Intense internal pressures and external economic sanctions eventually crippled the apartheid regime. Despite the violent nature of most of the movement, it culminated in a remarkably peaceful, negotiated transition in 1994 with the first democratic election and a new constitution.
Nelson Mandela, who had led many of these movements, was democratically elected president on April 27, 1994, the country's Independence Day. However, despite their independence, South Africa remains very much tied to their former colonizer, the UK.
That's right, Drew. The UK remains a major trade and investment partner. Additionally, the economic legacy of the colonial area exploitation and land disposition persists, contributing to ongoing inequality in racial, political, and cultural structures.
Absolutely. Their relationship is diplomatic and economically beneficial, but the historical injustices caused by their colonizer still have very harmful social impacts today that have not been forgotten by South Africans.
Notably, this independence movement has inspired many others. Similar approaches combining mass protest and negotiation occurred in Zimbabwe and Namibia, where intense internal and external pressures forced white minority regimes to transition to majority rule.
This movement also inspired other movement groups to not give up. Oh, and did you know that the African National Congress was formed in 1912, thus leading the struggle for over 8 decades?
Wow, Drew, that is so crazy. I suppose this event overall demonstrates something historic. The power of sustained movements, never giving up decade over decade, ultimately succeeding in a monumental shift toward an inclusive and democratic society.
Absolutely. We'd like to give a special shout out to our sponsors, History.com, the New York Times, Britannica, and South African History Online for supplying us with our information.
Thank you for joining us today.
And remember, all democracy and inclusivity requires people that are willing to fight for their rights. Thank you.